What is up, folks? It's episode 5 of After the Buzzer, and many things have happened since last we spoke. We're going to cover a lot of those. My name is Mike Gross, and my partner's name is Gordy Jones, who watched the Sixers win a playoff game last night and came away, what?
I would say reassured that that they are the team that maybe we thought they were, although it didn't look like that for a half.
It didn't.
And then in the third quarter, they scored 51 points, which equaled a record that dates back to 1962.
51 points in the third quarter.
Correct.
Which is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
It really is.
And finished with 145, which is matched a playoff record, or it's the most points since 1990 in a playoff game.
And it's not like Embiid had 45, which you'd think if they're going to score that many points, you would think that he'd have to. Almost.
Yeah. The one of the many interesting things that happened was 4 of their starters had 12 shots, and Jimmy Butler had 10. The guy who had the most shots on the team was Boban Marjanovic, as we all expected.
Yeah, really. Although that dude can score.
He can, yes.
Yeah, I mean, he's such a gigantic human being. It's so mechanical. It's give us the pop culture reference.
Oh, Chief from One Flew.
Over the
my bad. I missed my cue there. My bad.
Sorry, but threw that at you too cavalierly, I guess.
But truth, yes, the man does have some skills. I mean, it was interesting. Dikembe Mutombo was there last night, and I would actually argue that Boban's offensive game is more polished than Dikembe's was.
Oh, sure, yeah.
That he has a greater toolkit at that end of the court than Dikembe had in his heyday. But
and he's so big that he sort of has airspace above everybody else, which is really unusual in the NBA with all the gigantic human beings in that league. He's gigantic by gigantic standards.
But I think above and beyond all that, I think the thing that was really impressive was how the Sixers guarded. They finally figured out how to get a handle on Brooklyn's little guys, D'Angelo Russell in particular, and that goes to Ben Simmons. He just denied him in the third quarter, and that turned the game around. Brooklyn did not score on its first 5 possessions and 7 of the first 8, and they fell down by 23, and that was pretty much the game. In fact, I think the signature play was Jared Allen was standing at the top of the circle, and he was trying just a simple pass to D'Angelo on the right wing, and Simmons got his hand on it, kind of teetered out of bounds while the ball was going toward the backcourt, and he recovered, grabbed the ball, went in and scored.
Yeah, right. I remember that play, yeah.
And put him up 20. And Simmons' game overall, I mean, after game 1 where he wasn't aggressive, where the team got booed, he reacted to the booing. He tried to back off that. And then last night, he responded by giving them a real quick start offensively in the first half with his aggressiveness at that end, and then gave him a real quick start in the second half with his aggressiveness at the other end.
Yeah, so I thought he was great.
It might have been his best game as a Sixer. Might very well have been.
He really was good, beyond the statistics, and he can change the game defensively. He doesn't always do it.
Right.
And they're not as good as it seems like they ought to be defensively, as we've discussed before, but he can really change it just because he's, well, not all of it, but he's so long and athletic.
Right.
You know?
He can literally guard all 5 positions, and has.
And you could see how he could take D'Angelo Russell or a guy like that out of the game.
Right.
And a couple other things about this that I want to bounce off you. Number one, Embiid had this brutal elbow to the face of this guy who was guarding him for
Jared
the Nets.
Allen, yeah.
Jared, yeah. And he got a flagrant, which I thought was correct.
Oh, absolutely.
Obvious. It was an obvious one. In fact, he's maybe lucky that he didn't get more. And after the game, he's asked about it, and he's sitting next to Simmons, and they're kind of, he says, I'm sorry. Yeah. And then Simmons kind of laughs, and they both kind of crack up, which is, I mean, maybe not a huge deal, but
it's a
not
bad
a good look.
It's a bad
look. And to what extent are these guys becoming reviled around the league almost?
Well, it's my impression of Embiid has kind of changed over these last several days. You know, I used to just think he was kind of a big, goofy kid, kind of fun-loving. And then in game 1, of course, we had the situation with Amir Johnson and his cell phone where they're looking at it. And after the game, Embiid says, "Oh, that was just Amir showing me that his daughter was ill and she's doing better," and which, you know, maybe you believe that, maybe you do not. And then that last night, I mean, that's going to come back and haunt him. that kind of thing. I mean,
Yeah.
it's to me, it just shows that they still have a lot of growing up to do, and I think that's going to haunt him. I mean, the flagrant foul he had against Jared Allen, it was initially ruled a flagrant foul 1. It's since been upgraded to 2. So he has 1 flagrant foul point. You get 4 before you get an ejection. Now, I don't know if he'll challenge that or not. I don't know if they'll be playing long enough to do that. But to me, it just speaks to the whole mind. Yeah. These are this is the face of their franchise, Embiid, and to a slightly lesser degree Simmons.
Yeah, right.
And you have them like that. Is that really what you want out there?
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing is, supposedly, Brett Brown really tore into him at halftime.
I would have loved to hear that.
Yeah, wouldn't you? Wouldn't that be great?
To hear it in that accent?
I mean, that's almost like the that could be like the cold open of Saturday Night Live, right? Couldn't it?
Absolutely.
I mean, except that it's too regional.
Yeah, too regional. But there is a Twitter account that has the Brett Brown accent. And
I follow that one. Yeah.
Yes, which is hilarious just on a normal day. But
that's a good one.
To have Brett using some blue language in his Australian / Boston accent, Bostralian as Tim Duncan has called it, to have that must have been. I mean, obviously they took it the way it was intended, but I mean
they must have responded to it.
They clearly did, particularly Simmons. The way he went out and guarded in the third quarter, he set the tone. He really did, and everybody fed off that.
So there. That's a mature team. That's an immature team that needs to have that to respond. But on the other hand, Simmons is a really young guy. He's a very young kid. He's a kid. So,
yes.
Yeah.
And he said something sarcastic about, he after that play that we just discussed where he stole the ball and was cruised in and scored, he cupped his hand to his ear, a la Iverson, who was sitting side court with Dikembe. And so he was asked about that, and his first reaction was that was just remembering the booing from game 1. Well, don't go there, dude.
But isn't that kind of? I think that could be perceived that way.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're not booing me, are you?
Right.
So that's kind of tone deaf too.
I think that there's still a sizable amount of growth there. Now, and here's an interesting tangent to that. I mean, Amir Johnson, really the sole reason he's on the team now is to be the quote-unquote leader, and he's the one with the cell phone on the bench.
Cell phone, yeah.
So, I mean, it's a bad look all the way around. I mean, it just doesn't speak well to what their team is about and just the chemistry that's there. It just really, to me, it's going to bite them.
And sometimes it's possible to overreact to these intangible things and this language, body language stuff, and all that. And they did destroy the Nets last night. I mean, it was
as they should. They're the better team.
They should. They're the better team. That's right. And I think they figured out something a little bit about how to defend them.
Yes,
last night, so.
But this is always, to me, that's the fascinating thing about a playoff series when you see the same team for 4 to 7 games, just how the adjustments and then the adjustments to the adjustments, and also the bad blood that builds up, and it obviously has built up now.
Yeah.
I mean, he elbowed the guy in the face.
Yeah.
You don't do that.
and you know what? That must have hurt, man. I mean,
that guy could take a punch. I mean,
I was impressed with the way he handled that.
Yes,
really,
yes.
The way Allen handled that. I mean, imagine getting drilled by that guy in your face. I mean, wow. But the other thing is, it's adjustments to the adjustments, and I think Brooklyn has a pretty good coach.
Yes,
I think they will adjust to the extent that they can. I mean, when you adjust, it comes out to the better team usually wins. But
what he said after the game was that if Brooklyn doesn't figure out a way to rebound with the Sixers, it's going to be over quick. The rebounding advantage was 49-32, if memory serves, and that's a huge margin. And they are an enormous team, the Sixers. I mean, probably the biggest team in the NBA. Their smallest starter is 6'4", which obviously kind of bites them on the defensive end often, as we've seen.
Yeah.
However, when they can just physically overwhelm you.
And last year they were, I think, statistically the best rebounding team in the NBA. They have not been this year. Again, it's kind of like the defense thing. I don't really understand why, but that could be an edge for them, a wild card factor. And then we come back to, well, if the threes go in. If the threes go in,
Right.
there aren't as many rebounds available. You know how that
Yeah,
goes.
well, one of the sidebar things that happened last night was Tobias Harris. He missed his first 5 shots, but then when he made a couple free throws at the beginning of the third, and that seemed it's the old thing about finally seeing the ball go in. And once he got going, you could just see the confidence kind of seep back into him.
I wonder if he is a little bit of a diva in terms of his mental toughness. Not a diva, that's not the right word, but he's
I understand
a
what you're
little bit
saying.
erratic in terms of
He
his
is.
confidence.
He is.
His confidence is not as bulletproof as it ought to be because he has not played well for a couple weeks
I
now.
know it's been a rough stretch for him, and
I
that
love
surprises
him as a player.
I do too.
I really like what he can do.
I do too, and it really is kind of one of those things that makes you wonder. It's the old thing about he's put up numbers wherever he's been, but he's also played for mostly bad teams, and that's always dangerous to trust. Whether you can trust numbers on a bad team.
Yeah, and then sometimes guys are in bad teams for years and years and years, and then they become Sean Livingston on a good team or something like that.
Yeah.
But anyway, speaking of Sean Livingston, takes us to another NBA playoff series where there's a lot of intangible stuff apparently going on and off the court. The Golden State Warriors blew a 31-point. Who people think the NBA playoffs are just a coronation for this team. A lot of people think that. I don't think that quite, but blew a 31-point third quarter lead in Game 2 of their series with the LA Clippers at Oakland last night. So that series is now 1-1, and more than that, are the Warriors a little bit of a mess right now?
It seems like they've been a mess off and on all year.
Yeah, maybe not right now. Yeah,
it's sort of between Durant probably going after this year, Cousins just there as a 1-year rental probably, Iguodala and Livingston both kind of getting up there, and their bench is kind of just okay. It's not as great as it has been in years past. I mean, you thought maybe they'd kind of figured some things out, the last several games of the regular season, entering into Game 1 of the series against the Clippers, which they won handily, and they actually apparently there was some admission that that's the team they wanted to play, that they wanted to play the Clippers, and well, now they got them, and now you have our old friend, speaking of Sixers, Lou Williams, who's just on his way to his second straight Sixth Man of the Year, and the man can just score.
Yeah, he really can. He's one of those. He's one of those guys. He's the Jamal Crawford of.
He is.
Maybe even more so because he can kind of generate it on. He doesn't need much help to score.
Yeah, and he's got that clever old man game. It's like a bunch of little feints and up fakes, and
he's very, very good.
He never seems like he's in a big rush, but he gets where he needs to get to, and he can really shoot. So I think we have an interesting series on our hands. Now that's and along with that, they lost Cousins. For the playoffs with a torn quad.
Which means, do they go back to being what they were a little bit? Would that even be a good thing? Because it doesn't seem. We were talking about this earlier. It doesn't seem to me like this could be true. But the metrics say that they're not as efficient a team with him on the court as off on either end of the court, which kind of surprises me a little bit because it seems like they figured out how to work him in the last 6 weeks, 8 weeks. I don't know.
It's a strange thing because so much of what the NBA is defending the pick and roll, and to me, Kayvon Looney, who's had a pretty good year, is better at that than Cousins is, and he's kind of a more skinnier guy, can move his feet a little better, and he ends up a lot of times, especially when they play Houston, he ends up on James Harden all the time. So
that's not going to go well.
That's not going to go well for anybody. But at least they have a little bit better chance with Kayvon Looney doing that than DeMarcus Cousins. So I'll really be curious to see what the next game is like. If one part of me thinks that Golden State's going to come out and just beat them by 50, that they're just not going to leave anything to chance. But another part of me says that maybe they're shaken a little bit, that this isn't quite the Golden State team we expected.
Yeah, and you can't say, as people did to the point of nauseum during the season, well, they just don't care. They're not interested. You can't say that now.
No.
I mean, obviously not. It's the playoffs. So
right.
They do seem a little bit messed up. And I don't know if I said this on the pod or just talking, but we know that Durant is gone at the end of the year.
Right.
I mean, that seems 99% sure. When's the last time a team won a championship and a piece as critical as him left? to move on. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
I don't know if that's ever happened.
Doesn't
in the
happen
NBA.
often.
I mean,
can't-
chose to leave.
Right.
That's the critical thing.
Yeah, I can't picture it. And so he's going to choose to leave to go to the Knicks, maybe. Okay, good luck, Kevin.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck with that. So that's the NBA playoffs. It's we're 2 games in now. I mean, it's a long way to go. But I certainly think Milwaukee was impressive.
Yes.
They look like they're humming, and they've got maybe the best basketball player on this planet right now.
Unguardable.
I mean, yeah,
The guy is unguardable.
he's really something else. What else has been impressive so
Well,
far?
Houston just kind of toyed with Utah in the first game of that series. I kind of thought Utah would give it a little better showing, but it wasn't really. There's not much there. I mean, it was Donovan Mitchell kind of driving into 4 red shirts.
Yeah, he's a little bit of an immature player. Very talented, but
Very talented.
Just a little bit of a just put your head down and go guy a little bit, but. They probably don't have enough, but I thought they would show a little better.
Yeah,
and Harden didn't go absolutely nuts in that game.
No, but a lot of guys did a lot of things. I think that was a pretty impressive opener for Houston, I thought.
All right, let's move on to the fabulous Phillies.
Yes. And how it appears they have an Aaron Nola problem
Yeah, they
now,
have
which
an
is a
Aaron
problem they do not need because they
Yeah.
do not have enough pitching as is.
He was one of the 5 best pitchers in baseball last year. If he's only the 15th or 20th best pitcher in baseball this year, that's just baseball. That's just the
Right.
normal.
Right.
That's not
Right.
indicative of anything. But where he's at right now, he's not even going to be that. And you always have to look at workload with these starting pitchers. I know people don't want to hear that. Old timers think that's nonsense, but it's not. You have to look at it.
Yeah, and he's just a skinny little guy.
Yeah.
I mean, there's not much to him, so you would think that maybe that could be a factor, or maybe we're just overreacting because it's mid-April and
that's probably the correct answer,
Right.
Because that's just the nature of baseball, but it's not crazy to be concerned about it if you're a Phillies fan right now, because it's a big drop off after him.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we don't know what Arrieta is anymore. I mean, he's pitched okay so far, but he wasn't very good last year, and he's been around for a while now. So,
and he's very reliant on he pitches to the bat, which is
Right.
not popular these days, but you have to be pretty good defensively behind him, and I think the Phillies are better defensively.
they couldn't be much worse than they were last year.
Yeah, they were terrible last year, and that certainly was a factor in his numbers. But the lineup is really good.
Really good.
Yeah, I mean,
Gene Segura, professional hitter.
yeah, he's really a good player, and they had. Just in terms of upgrading their starting 8, they really had a great offseason.
Yeah, there's not many soft spots in that lineup.
Yeah,
really,
so-
they're really. I mean, Scott Kingery has come in and hit a little bit, and he's.
Yeah.
As we sit here on a Tuesday, he's supposed to start tonight because Hoskins rolled an ankle last night against the Mets. So, get him some at bats is not a bad thing. It looks like he's made he's made some strides since last year.
Would Hoskins be a DH if they had the DH?
I would think.
Yeah,
I would think so.
I
Yeah.
think he would do. Right, and last year they were trying to make him an outfielder.
That didn't go
not
too well.
Meanwhile, in Washington, they were trying to make Bryce Harper a center fielder.
That didn't go well.
That really didn't go well. So, the guys that go out there and play every day for the Phillies, I mean, it looks pretty good.
Yes.
They should be better defensively. They're certainly better offensively. It's a really hard team to pitch to.
Yes.
It's a good offense. We often come back to, are they going to pitch enough? And we haven't seen enough to tell yet.
No, but it would appear that they need to upgrade their staff to some degree. I mean, the name you always hear out there is Madison Bumgarner, that maybe the Giants would be willing to part with him. Now, do the Phillies have the prospects to do that? I mean, I can't claim to be conversant with the Phillies minor league system.
Yeah, me either.
But that would probably be a good name, even though, speaking of guys who have had a workload, I mean, if you have a chance, go on Baseball Reference sometime and look at, I think it's 6 straight years he had over 200 innings, and then the last 3 years he's been banged up and in and out. So I'm not sure Bumgarner is what he used to be.
And he doesn't want to hear that.
Oh, I'm sure.
Give me
he
the
does.
ball, get out there. He's one of
Yeah.
those old school guys.
Sure he is.
He doesn't want to hear that.
Yeah, I mean he's had a really impressive run, but I think he's at the back end of that at the very least.
Yeah, no doubt. Now, moving on from the Phillies to our next topic. I write a column every Monday in the paper, and I was going to write about Penn State, but then something happened on Sunday that you may have heard about, which is Tiger Woods won the Masters in spectacular fashion, and the conclusion of this deal was like something out of a Disney movie, and everybody's hugging, and everybody's emotional, and everybody's crying and yelling and carrying on, and it really was a cool thing to see to almost everybody in America. The exception is my partner. nothing against Tiger.
No, not at all. I mean, I always root for the best story. I always root for the scribe. So that's fine. But I'm just not taken with the whole magic of Augusta, and you got hit over the head for 3 weeks with these commercials with the perfectly shaded greens and
the tinkling piano,
the tinkling piano music. And please give me a break.
Hey, give me a physical break. It used to be the most autocratic sort of patrician. It used to be this old South bastion of the past.
Yes.
And I think they've gotten a lot more progressive.
Let's hope.
In a lot of areas. I mean, they started having this amateur tournament for women, which is really a cool thing. They have this competition for little kids, which I think is mostly cosmetic. I mean, they're just trying to create an image. But, women are members of the place now. Right. I mean, it's Condoleezza Rice, but, still women. So they've made an effort to be a little bit, they are a relatively progressive sports institution in the sense of trying to improve. They've adopted a lot of modern things. So that's, but anyway, we shouldn't be, the story is Tiger.
Right. And which, of course, is going to lead back to the inevitable discussion. Can he catch Jack Nicklaus now? That's, where do you stand on that topic? He's at 15 now, right?
He's at 15. Jack's at 18. Let me give you a little golf history here. Golf history trivia. This is something I think is actually interesting. Before the Masters existed, the fourth major championship was the Western Open. The Western Open was considered this is in the 30s. I mean,
where is the Western Open?
The Western Open no longer exists, but it was in Chicago. Oh. It was in around Chicago.
Okay.
If you count wins Tiger has 15 majors. If you count wins in the Western Open before the Masters existed, Walter Hagen has 16 majors.
Ooh.
Nobody ever says that. Nobody. If he shows up on the list, it showed with 11. Anyway,
is that Larry's brother from I Dream of Jeannie?
No, that's an excellent guess, but it is not correct. It's a little before even Larry Hagen's time. Anyway, Tiger Woods is. I don't find myself rooting for Tiger Woods, to be honest with you.
Understood.
Which puts me in the extreme minority because I think it has already been lost how much he squandered.
Yes.
Himself.
Yes.
It was this stuff that's happened to him has been mostly self-imposed. And I mean I could do 2 hours on that, and I promise I won't, but and the other thing is he was at one time he was better than I thought it was humanly possible to be at golf. Mm-hmm. I mean I would never even imagine making that statement about any other athlete in any sport ever. And it's amazing to me what he squandered. I feel like he squandered. But people have so long forgotten about that. Even I was listening to another podcast with two guys that coming in here. They are sort of deliberately leaving big chunks out of this story in order to sort of totally embrace it. It was a cool thing to see, and it certainly enlivens golf because golf is now at a place where they've changed their schedule so they have one major a month. Mm-hmm. Like the Masters is in April, the PGA is now in May, U.S. Open in June, British Open in July. So golf is going to kind of own the summer, I think, in terms of just this whole Tiger story. And he can catch Jack Nicklaus. I don't know that he will, but here's the thing. in 2000, he won the U.S. Open by 15 shots, and then like 3 weeks later, he won the British Open by 8 shots. I mean, that's just insane. That's like winning the Super Bowl 150 to nothing. I mean, it's just crazy. That was nothing like what happened on Sunday. On Sunday, he shot 2 under and put the ball in the right places and didn't make any mistakes and let other guys hit it in the water, and that's how he won. And that's how it's going to be.
Right.
That's how it's going to be from now on. People who think they're going to see this magical, insane stuff,
No.
it's just not realistic. It's not. He's human, But can he win 3 more? I think he probably can.
And people have pointed out that the courses where the other majors are this year are places where he has won before.
Yeah, Beth Page, which is actually a public golf course up in Long Island. It's a state park golf course where he won the Open in 2002, and that's where the PGA is this year, next month. And the Open is at Pebble Beach, where of course he has an excellent track record. And Pebble Beach is not a place where it's not one of these like claustrophobic target golf courses where you absolutely have to drive it from point A to point B to get, which is not. I think that works in his favor too. Although he really drove it well in the Masters, and if he drives it well, look out.
I mean, some of the things I find amazing are, above and beyond the personal foibles of his, which are considerable. Just the fact that he's had 4 back surgeries and 4 knee surgeries, just that alone, for him to come back and play at this level is interesting to me.
And one of the most interesting things in the coverage of this was on Golf Channel afterwards on Sunday. They had Nota Begay, who is a broadcaster now, played with him at Stanford, played the tour for a while, is very, very good friends with Tiger. And he said at the worst of this, he went over to his house to visit him, and he couldn't get out. He couldn't get off the sofa. And they say, hey, let's go pick up my kids at school. He had to help him get to the car. Tiger couldn't drive the car because he couldn't sit upright in the driver's seat. So Noda had to drive the car, and he had a couple surgeries after that. There was a time when he couldn't get out of bed. 3 years ago, he was like 1199th in the world. I mean, it is pretty amazing. No matter how he got to where he was. How he got back to here is pretty amazing deal.
Yeah, it's this is why we keep tuning in or showing up.
There you go. All right, Gordy is thinking enough golf, so I'm gonna agree with him on this. Saturday, I was up at the Happy Valley. You've heard of the Happy Valley, I'm sure, for the blue-white game, which is Penn State's intra-squad scrimmage. And as I said, I was going to write about Penn State a little bit on Monday, if not for the Tiger thing. And I was trying. However, we were driving home. Our pal Dave Jones were driving home, and there's silence in the car. And I said to Dave, "I can't even think of something like snarky, making fun of this game. This game was a non-entity,
as it so often is.
Yeah.
And I mean, because the best guys usually don't play. The guys who star seldom are huge factors in the fall.
Yeah.
And plus it's in the middle of spring. And
the other thing is, way more than Joe Paterno, James Franklin stacks one of the teams.
Right.
So the blue team is the guys who are going to play in the fall, and almost exclusively, there's 1 or 2 exceptions to that. The white team is the JVs, essentially.
Right.
So that was, but I think that, given that fact, there was something, and this is what I was going to write, if not for Tiger on Monday. There is something, which is that they did not run the ball the blue team did not run the ball very effectively against the JVs. And Franklin acknowledged that after the game. And I think we're back to this again, which I have gotten tired of talking about and writing about. I think the offensive line could be an issue again.
Even though they've recruited really well at that position over the last 5 years, and they've had a couple position coaches in and out of there, highly regarded guys. But when last year they had a hard time running with the year before last they had a hard time running with Saquon. So
they actually ran the ball more effectively last year without Saquon Barkley,
which makes little sense at all. But it's an odd thing to me that it doesn't add up to one of the better offensive lines in the country, as well as they've recruited at that position, and year after year they brought in highly regarded guys. And now they're going to have to replace a couple guys that are going to be in the NFL draft, Ryan Bates and Connor McGovern. So
and this is the thing that makes me go a little bit. A couple times Franklin's line about the offensive line is, we like to teach them multiple positions, but we really want to find the best 5 and have them play together and develop the chemistry and communication and all that stuff that you have to have in the offense, kind of uniquely on a football team, I think. This year he's talking about, more than 5 guys are going to play. Mm-hmm. We've got a couple of interesting position battles, and it looks like both of the guys at that position are going to play. And one of them at tackle is a redshirt freshman. Which, that's another thing Franklin always says, is that offensive line is the hardest place to play early. And now they've got who is a guy who has been, the other players and coaches have really, his name's a kid named Rashid Walker, that the other players have really raved about. He apparently is an extraordinary, talent, but still. So this makes me think that maybe it's an issue going forward, even though I'm extremely reticent to draw any conclusions from spring football.
Of course. So, whatever happened to Mike Miranda? Wasn't he supposed to be a player?
Well, Mike Miranda is battling with C.J. Thorpe at one of the guard spots. That's another thing. I fully expected Miranda to be a starter. Thorpe is he's a stud, but he played defense most of the year last year. They think his future is, including an NFL future, would be on the offensive line. But he's a real aggressive, physical, athletic.
I think he's unlike some of the guys they've had on the offense. He really wants to mangle people.
And Franklin talks about that a lot. He says, I've had a lot of offensive linemen that I would be happy if they dated my daughter. They're really nice guys, and they're smart, and they're conscientious, and they're all that stuff. But they're not as mean as I would like them to be.
Yeah, he says that a lot about Steven Gonzalez, actually, in particular, who's actually one of the stronger guys on the team, but not as
he's a monster. Yeah.
Not as aggressive as Franklin would like. They've mentioned that on more than one occasion. Whereas C.J. Thorpe, he seems to want to mix it up a little bit. So I would not be at all surprised to see him be a pretty big factor for them this year. His dad, by the way, Chris Thorpe, played at Penn State years ago. He was not, a frontline player necessarily.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah. Chris. And which was kind of interesting to me because when he was being recruited at Michigan by Michael Zordich, who, of course, also played at Penn State. So Michael Zordich and Chris Thorpe, at one point Chris Thorpe was a fullback, so they literally butted heads in practice, and now Zordich was...
You were delivering the Penn State trivia.
Well, that was a story that I had written, and I don't know why I remember that. Just one of those odd things that stick in my mind. But yes, his dad played at Penn State years and years ago, and now CJ... we'll see how much of a factor he is this year.
Yeah, I mean, this is kind of the end. This is kind of the end of thinking about Penn State for a long time until August, and of course the coaches are all on the road now recruiting, and
right.
This is my beat, but it won't be much of a beat for the next few months. Which brings us to plugs. Let's plug away. What are you working on, my man?
Well, I'm going to have some more Sixer stuff coming up. They are away until next Tuesday. As we sit here, a week from today, that will be Game 5. So we'll see how this series unfolds between now and then. In the recent past, I had Bobby Jones on the phone, and he talked about being elected to the Hall of Fame, which was a little bit of a surprise because, like Mo Cheeks last year, he did not necessarily have that huge statistical profile that would suggest Hall of Famer. However, he made the all-defensive first team. I think it was all but 2 of his 12 seasons in the NBA. He made second team another year. So and
he was pretty unique.
Yeah, he was. And so it was interesting to talk to him about his journey and just how there was the late George Shirk wrote for the Inquirer years ago, and he wrote one of the great feature stories I've ever read. It was called The Simple Joys of Bobby Jones. He's from Charlotte, North Carolina. He went down and visited with Bobby, and he talked about when he was growing up. He never had any interest in playing basketball, but his dad played at Oklahoma, his older brother played at Oklahoma, and they would basically badger him to come out and play with them on this outdoor court, because all he wanted to watch was the Andy Griffith Show. And we actually talked about that. Of course, Aunt B, what's she up to? So that was Bobby's thing. He was the phrase he used last week when I talked to him was he was a couch potato, but then he went out, and of course he had the body and
Isn't that weird for a guy that
Yes.
6'9" and very
Yes.
athletic? A great leaper.
Yes, he was a high school high jumper, and I talked to him just about. I said, "Come on, Bobby, nobody likes to play defense." And he said, "Well, I did. I have a stubborn streak," and that was the phrase. I really like that.
Interesting.
Yeah,
that is interesting.
And he really did. And you know, one of the great quotes I've ever heard about Bobby Jones was when I was writing a book several years ago about the Sixers, and I talked to Clark Kellogg, who's now, of course, a broadcaster for the NCAAs for CBS. And he said, you know, despite his demeanor, Bobby was a hard guy. I mean, you have to acknowledge it. You may not realize it, you know, just looking at him or hearing him speak. But if you're going to play at that level to that degree, he was a hard guy. And I really like that description.
On the court, he was kind of stoic.
Yes.
Wasn't he?
Yeah.
That's how I remember him.
He just played.
But a tough guy.
Never got a tee. It was known, and this is another thing we talked about, was known for pointing to his teammate to acknowledge his assist. He said that was a Dean Smith thing.
A Dean Smith thing.
Yeah. And he did that even if he missed the layup. He said, because it wasn't the guy's fault that I missed the layup. So
makes perfect sense. Yeah.
So I'm really happy for him, as I was for Maurice Cheeks, because, you know, there are guys who compile stats who I would regard as not being winning players, and then there are guys like Cheeks and Bobby Jones who maybe didn't put up, you know, enormous stats, but were definitely winning players and made winning plays night in and night out.
This reminds me of a general thing that I believe about sports, which is that just because statistics are deceptive in specific cases for good and obvious reasons,
Right.
doesn't mean that statistics aren't useful or don't make sense, which I think some people overreact. You know what I mean?
Sure.
Overreact in that way. I mean, you know, it's. I mean, Hank Aaron at one time was the all-time career leader in grounding into double plays. Well, you know, he played 22 years and never was out of the lineup. Hello, you know, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Right. I like that. I like
think Bobby
that.
Jones and Bobby Jones and Mo Cheeks are a good example of that. And are there now 4 Hall of Famers from that Sixers team?
Yeah.
And the guy who sometimes seemed like their best player at times, not always, but is not a Hall of Famer, Andrew Toney.
Yeah, and which is, in fact, I wrote about him fairly recently, and I got Danny Ainge on the phone, and he said, as great as Moses Malone and Julius Erving were, we, meaning the Celtics of that era, feared Andrew Toney more, as they should have.
Yeah.
Now, my favorite Andrew Toney quote, this is described to me by the late Phil Jasner. The first time his rookie year, they go to Boston Garden. So they get off the bus, and I was never to the old Boston Garden, much less the new one. But apparently you have to go upstairs to get to the arena.
Right.
So Andrew's looking around, and his quote was, "Where the gym at?" Which is just my favorite athlete quote, because it just to him, it's like, well, here's this basketball cathedral where Bill Russell played and Larry Bird, and he goes, "Where the gym at?"
Yeah,
and then once he got in there, he tore him apart.
Yeah, he seemed like a guy who did not have much interest in the trappings.
No, and still doesn't.
Just wanted to kick your ass.
Yeah, and often did.
And was really good at it.
Yeah, and that was also for this story. I talked to Bob Bryan, and his line was that Andrew is the best forgotten great player in NBA history.
Wow.
And so then I asked Julius Erving about that, and he said, well, I think Andrew likes it that way.
Yeah, pretty happy with where things are.
I mean, because he's hiding in plain sight. He lives in Georgia. He works in the school district down there outside Atlanta. He works with, at-risk kids. So he's doing a lot of really admirable work, but he has no interest in talking to me or anybody else. So he has no interest in rehashing his career. The story that if it's not true, you wish it were. John Nash told me this story that Andrew came back into Philadelphia. He was playing golf at a course in Glen Mills. And according to the story, according to the lore, he goes out there as a single. He signs up as T. Andrews. And he ends up playing, he's a single, so he's playing with a foursome. 3 businessmen from Boston, and they started talking about basketball, and they said about how much they liked the Celtics of the '80s, and Kevin McHale, Larry Bird, and all those guys, and they didn't know they were playing with Andrew Toney. That's the story. I called the course there, and they didn't know if he had played there or not. Yeah. But if it's not true, you wish it was.
Yeah. That's great. That's really. Are you surprised that Sixer team really only had the 1 year?
Well, you can say that, but I mean, if you look at that era from 76, 77 to 84, 85, they were in the finals in 77, 80, 82, 83, winning it at 83. They were also in the Eastern Finals as late as 84, 85 when Barkley was there. And yeah, they only got off at the top once, but that's a pretty good extended run of excellence.
And it just feels to me, and I know a lot of younger people don't want to hear this, but that just felt like the golden age of the NBA to me. Those teams were so good, though, and the talent was so stacked on 3 or 4 teams.
Right.
I think that's got to have a lot to do with it. Anyway.
Yeah, and golden age really of Philadelphia sports too. If you think about the titles that were won.
Yeah, sure.
And really, my favorite Sixer game of all time, Game 7, 82 Eastern Finals, when they went into the Boston Garden and Andrew just ate their lunch.
Tore them up. And I remember, I think it was Bob Ford. There may have been others, Philly writers who wrote the Sixers off, and then
Bill Lyon most notably.
Maybe it was Bill Lyon. Maybe I have them mixed up.
His story is that he just destroyed them. Said there's no way they're going to go in there and win. And after the game, Billy Cunningham is smoldering the whole game. He gives like a 2-sentence post-game press conference. I'm just happy for the guys in there. I'm tired of you guys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so apparently Billy's sitting off to the side in the locker room, and Bill Lyon walks up to him and he says, "The line for apologies forms here." So I thought that was kind of a nice gesture on.
Yeah. Maybe I'm thinking it was Bob Ford and it was really Bill Lyon. That's probably right. But that's what I was thinking. Yeah. He actually went up to him and apologized. And, offered his hand. And, so anyway. Your Sixer stuff can be found.
Forbes.com.
Boom.
And actually the Andrew Toney story, which has been out for a while now, and also a story about Moses Malone was on The Athletic. So feel free to subscribe to that.
Which is a great publication. It's the internet version of Sports Illustrated, I think.
Yeah, it's really, I mean, it's almost overwhelming sometimes because there's so many things on there that you want to read.
Yeah. And they in a time when nobody else is doing it, they're going out and hiring. They just hired Ed Bouchette. Did you see that?
Yeah, I did see that.
They're going out and really hiring people, and
Ed Bouchette, for those listening, he's basically the dean of the Pittsburgh Steelers media corps. It just is deep inside and always gets the best information.
And is in the Pro Football Hall of Fame, in the Writers' Wing of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, and has family around here.
Did not know that.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
Do you remember Gary Bouchette?
I do.
That's his nephew. Who knew? Go figure. He's now an assistant at Cedar Crest. All right. Folks, that's episode 5. I think it was fairly epic.
Do we want to tease our Jimmy Lynam?
Episode 4 of the big podcast was our first guest. He was Jimmy Lynam, the former Sixers coach, the current Sixers studio analyst. Also was a great college coach at St. Joe's.
Yes, he was.
And really breaks it down. We were talking about this before. If you watch Jimmy, he's good in the studio with the Sixers on the Sixers network. But I think he's even better when he has time to really crunch it a little bit and break it down. And I think you're going to see that in this segment, which is about 18 minutes or so long. That's in episode 4 of the big show.
Yes, it was an interview that we recorded before the playoffs began, but due to technical difficulties, which is a podcast unto itself.
Well, someday we'll put out our greatest hits album, and then we'll include this section that sounds like Uriah Heep was recording backwards a coded message that the end is near. I don't know how we did that, but somehow we pulled it off.
This is what happens when you have 2 old white guys trying to record a podcast.
All right, so I guess that's today's message. That's the moral of today's show. All right, gang, thanks for being with us. Now, I want to tell you how you can find us. The Twitter feed is @BuzzerAfter. The Gmail is afterbuzzer@gmail.com. The Facebook is just search for After the Buzzer, and that's how you find us. We want to hear your comments. And you can get us on YouTube by searching After the Buzzer. That's the other thing. You can get us on YouTube, but there's more to come in terms of access to the show and being able to find it on a lot of the podcast platforms. But as you can tell from our technical expertise, that's going to be that's a work in progress.
That's an ongoing challenge.
All right. Thanks for being with us. We'll check you out next time. We are out.